If you're on the hunt for the juiciest slow-mo video coming out of a GoPro, then you have to go with the HERO8. The HERO7 Black can shoot in 240 frames per second as well, but the added stabilization and high frame rates for the HERO8 is a key feature for those often shooting in 240. My name is Yosh and this is episode 0, the prelude in my upcoming series titled Edit with Yosh. If you need to shoot slow-mo with the highest frames per second with stabilization, there are currently big discounts running on the HERO8, which you can peep in the links below. First, let's jump into the settings that I use on the HERO8. Then second, I'll go over stabilization between the HERO8 and the HERO7 with some comparison clips while out on the ice. Finally, at the end of this comparison, I'll link to a video of a full game recap where these two cameras went head to head. First up are the camera settings. These settings will need to be tweaked depending on where and what you're shooting, but fine-tuning them is all part of the fun and how you're going to get a better handle on how your action cam performs. The ones I'll show you today won't work best for every scenario, but it's what I use to record the 240 frames per second clips, and they'll serve as a good starting point if nothing else. Tapping on your preset will bring up all the presets that you have set up. I've named this one slow-mo and we'll edit. You hear a lot about 4K, but 1080p isn't dead yet, and it's our only option when shooting in 240. Likewise, we'll set our lens to wide, as this is our only option for 240 frames per second. Hypersmooth 2.0 should be set to on as opposed to off, and while it's not ideal to crop in 10%, it's something that we have to live with if we want to keep that hypersmooth stabilization on. Looking at this shot of my desk, you can see what that 10% crop looks like with the stabilization on and with the stabilization off. The rest of the settings in this top section we can leave default, and then we head down to the Pro Tune settings that are going to give you some extra control. We want to record in a high bit rate, so this will record more data for us. If we're shooting in 240 frames per second, we can put the shutter speed to 1/480 so that we double that up. White balance is something that I set to auto and adjust later in editing if I have to, but if you're in a special lighting condition, you might want to warm up or cool down your colors in camera itself. I keep my ISO range between 2 and 1600. Ideally, you want to keep this number as low as possible, but I found that 100 on the minimum end was too dark for the rink that I play at. You'll likely see similar results anytime you're shooting indoors. Sharpness we can crank up to high so that we keep things crispy. And lastly, if you're going to manipulate colors in your editing process, I would choose flat. If you want your image to look decent coming right out of the camera because you aren't going to edit later, then I would go with the GoPro color profile. Now that we've taken a look at the settings, let's compare the 240 frames per second clips side by side. Normally, stabilization isn't strictly necessary when shooting in high frame rates when the frames are played back in slow motion. By nature of all the extra frames, the clip played back slowly will appear to be stabilized. For example, here are two clips, one on the 7, one on the 8, where I'm going in on a breakaway. It's safe to assume that my helmet jostles around in roughly a similar fashion each time I go in on net. The slow motion softens the jarring camera movements associated with action cams. So at 4 times slow-mo, these clips both look pretty good, but playing back 240 frames per second clips in normal speed, 60 frames per second in the case of my videos, there is a noticeable difference, and that's the biggest reason to opt for the HERO8 in my opinion. Anytime you want to edit in a speed ramp, that is, if you want to change the time remapping to transition a clip from slow to high speed, the stabilized clip will look much better throughout that transition. With that stabilization, the drawback is the 10% crop that you see in Hypersmooth 2.0. While not ideal for action sports like hockey, I think the wide field of view, even with the crop, is good enough to capture most of the action you'll see, and I'm willing to trade that crop for the stabilization. If you don't need stabilization in 240 frames per second, or you're not thrilled with the new physical redesign of the camera, the HERO7 Black is still a great buy. As promised, linked here is the full-length comparison skate. In this video, I'm wearing the HERO8 Black, and our teammate Ray is wearing the HERO7. I'll be making more videos in the Edit with Yosh series, so whack that subscribe button to see future uploads.